RWBY Volume 6, Episode 8, Dead End. So this is my super late review for this week's episode. I was in the Great White North, which is Canada for you who might not know, so I missed this week's episode when it actually premiered. Apparently, Verve, which is what I use to watch RWBY, is not in Canada. I was trying to actually watch it because I ended up being sick, which was really crappy for a trip. And I was like, well, I'm sick, I might as well watch RWBY. And I went on and it was like, not available in the area. And I was like, well, that's just depressing. So I had to wait to watch the episode. And it's just one of those super crazy weeks. Like, I'm rarely a week behind on RWBY. I always try to keep up on that. But yeah, it's just been one of those super crazy weeks. So I saw the episode earlier this week. I just didn't get to actually end up reviewing it until now, like 2 or whatever time it is. Yeah, it's 2:30 in the morning. So it's just been one of those weird weeks. So I wanted to do it now because I was like, if I wait until tomorrow, I'm just gonna watch the new episode and then be like, crap. Well, now I have to review the old one and the new one. So I was like, I'll review it now before I even have the opportunity to see what the next episode's gonna be. But this was a good episode. I really enjoyed it. We got introduced to a new character, technically 3, but the 2 guys were just like over the top guards, and they just, they ran off going like hut hut hut, which was really funny to me because it reminded me of the old Blues Brothers movies because they have that in there towards the end of the movie. But they're super over the top. We get introduced to a new character, and I'm curious if she's gonna really play that big of a role. I assume she will, considering we have Maria as a brand new character as well, and obviously her importance. I feel like this would be like the new, a new minute antagonist. So we'll see more about her character, I'm sure. I can't remember the woman's name because I forgot to like memorize it when I watched it. And also, it's one of those things where I'm like, I could be wrong. Typically, they don't introduce people that aren't that important, but I'm just like, I just don't feel like she's gonna have that much weight. Like, she might be important for these next couple of episodes, and I feel like once they get past her, she might get referenced, every once in a while. But Maria hates her, which I thought was really funny. She talked about like having the cashew thing, and it was like, she just, that's their back and forth. She was like, we don't need to freak out yet. Maybe she's dead. And I was like, wow, that's like a super dark level of optimism, but it made me laugh, so I love that. This episode officially gives us the final scene that was missing from the opening. We actually got to see it in action, and I think I mentioned that in my last episode review, that everything so far has been shown off except for the scene with Jaune and Oscar. So we officially get that, and it's exactly like it is in the trailer. It's actually not like kind of like that. It's like that's the exact scene. And so it's of course we have the members, Jaune, Ren, and Nora. They find out what's going on and they learn the truth. So of course they're super pissed off. The funny thing is, Jaune brought up something that I didn't even think about before, which is that it's not really Oscar, but it's just Ozpin faking like he's Oscar, which I thought was an interesting concept. And considering, well, I don't know, it's hard to say. I was gonna say, considering how it played out during the segment when Ozpin like kind of takes off, it seemed like, yeah, that was legit. But technically, we aren't really in his mind or anything like that. He could have just taken over because we don't really know how that plays out. He could have that control, but considering the fact that Oscar ends up vanishing at the end, I would assume it was really Oscar just legitimately upset, or it will be a crazy twist and it will have been Ozpin and he was like, well, screw it, no one trusts me. Like, I don't know how to kind of turn them back on my side. They don't really have anywhere to go anyway right now because the woman kind of cut them off, even with Weiss being there with them. So it's like, all right, well, it's possible that it could actually be Ozpin, which I hadn't, like I said, I hadn't considered personally. I don't think it is. I think it would actually be more entertaining if it was still Oscar and it was him leaving, and we still don't know anything about Oscar. Like, all we know is that he has a mom, from when he was first introduced, and then that was pretty much it. Like, we don't actually see his mom, and then he's kind of off on the adventure within the rest of the series with the rest of the characters. So I would actually like to see, if this next episode is going to be focused on Oscar and him taking off and him reflecting on, the young life he's lived and how he's now at this young age been thrust into, not currently, but for the most part, his life is him sharing his spirit, or sharing his body, with someone else. And now they're all in this plan that's going to seemingly fail because there is no real end game to it anymore. So I hope that's what we get in the next episode, like him reflecting on what's to be done. Maybe we will see Ozpin show up because he'll recognize that Oscar is legitimately alone and it's like, oh, I need to come back just in case there's some danger, because we don't know what Ozpin can actually see at this point. So there's a lot of questions to that as well. So we might get that in the next episode, but I like the way it was handled. Him taking off at the end. That was kind of the our little teaser, going into tomorrow's episode, or I guess today by the time this is uploaded, or I guess technically today now because it's 2:30. But going into today's episode, but I'm looking forward to that. We also get Ruby kind of getting her first steps into learning about her silver eyes and stuff like that. We do hear Maria mention that it was from her father that she got the eyes. She learned a little bit from him, and that was pretty much it. Like, even with the lineage there, she never gained a ton of information. So I thought that was actually pretty interesting. And the main concept that kind of came up from that was, I learned a little bit from him, but he tended not to really talk too much about it. And she kind of picked up on the fact that the reason he wouldn't, there wasn't a lot of knowledge or anything to talk about for such an insane power is probably because the people that had these powers didn't want to talk too much about them because they were hunted down just like she was. So she realized, kind of as she grew up, like the reason there isn't a ton of widespread knowledge and it's just not in all the books all over the place is because anyone that knows about it is probably hunted and killed or blinded just like she was. So I thought that was interesting, but she does, of course, mention to Ruby, she knows that the ability of the Silver Eyes specifically comes from the God of Light because they kind of do a quick little flashback. And he uses the same ability when he's basically fighting against his brother, and he wipes the Grimm away. And they reference a couple of different things. They do mention the fact that the Grimm can be affected in multiple ways. They will either be blown back, turned to stone, or completely destroyed. And then, of course, they reference, Cinder and somehow her being, impacted by this before, of course, her being given the new arm. So there is that big question. Why was she affected? What's going on there? Is it possible? I mean, considering her character, she is like the first main villain. Technically it was Roman, but she was like the first real big bad. Because even when Roman was like the first villain, it was kind of like, okay, it's Roman. I mean, in the first episode, Cinder's technically there, and she's like the mystery character. And it was kind of obvious. It was like, okay, well, the mystery character that's hidden for later is always more important. So even when Roman was like the first villain, Cinder was always the main villain. So it could be the fact that she, in some way, shape, or form, descends directly from the dark sibling in some weird, crazy way. I mean, if considering all of humanity was wiped out, yet somehow, the Silver Eyes comes from the God of Light, there's probably some abilities or something that was left over from the God of Darkness as well. And maybe that's why Cinder was impacted, because it would affect, that ability from the light side would impact her being from the dark side. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because it didn't kill her, but it destroyed her eye, it destroyed her arm, but she was right there. And the dragon that was right there was completely turned to stone, and she was just wounded, like really, really bad, but she wasn't completely destroyed. So there's got to be something to it. I would assume that it has nothing to do with the fact that she also has some abilities from the light, because we would have seen that impact with Maria when Ruby used her powers when they were in the basement. So I assume that that's what it is. That's, like just a random theory just to throw out there, is that somehow Cinder is a descendant of the God of Darkness. Whatever power she has, was impacted by Ruby because she has her powers from the light side. So who knows? Like I said, if that is the case, it would kind of make sense almost, because Cinder, especially now, I mean, Cinder was like the first big bad. She's been, even though she was defeated by Ruby, she still is one of the maidens at this point. So there's still a lot with her character where she has her own goals in mind. Like her working with Neo now, where it's like, technically I can't kill Ruby, but you don't have such orders. But all in all, she wants Ruby dead, and she doesn't give a crap what her boss says. So she doesn't care about Salem's goals ultimately. She wants Ruby dead. So, there's a lot there. Like, Cinder is her own thing. So she is, I would assume, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Cinder did ultimately become like the final villain of the series. But with where they're headed, they kind of throw the big question. I was like, oh, maybe there's something Ruby missed. And maybe it is. Maybe there's something that was just there the whole time. That's kind of the bread and butter of this series. It's like, oh, that semblance, we've seen Jaune's semblance, but we still don't know what it is really. So it's just kind of the bread and butter of the show. Like, we've seen what there is to see. We just didn't know that we saw it already. So I don't know. Go back to the old seasons. Check out what's going on with Cinder. Why you think she was impacted. I would love to know your theories on that. Like, what is the reason that Cinder was affected, by Ruby's blast. So it's not just like, oh, this person's good, this person's bad, and bad people are affected, or Ruby wants to affect this specific person because they're attacking each other. It has to be a Grimm. So there's definitely something to it, but I would love to know your theories on that. Of course, would love to know what you guys thought about this episode in general, so please put your comments down in the comment section below. Let me know your favorite parts about it, least favorite parts about it. Like I said, I definitely want to know your theories on what the deal is, why Cinder was impacted. I would also love to know what you guys want to see going into the next episode as far as Oscar is concerned. I would love it to focus at least half on him. I assume it'll be another 15-minute episode, so I want at least part of the story to focus on the weird relationship that he has, what's going on with him, his life in general, as short as it may be currently. What's the deal with him? Maybe we'll even get the answer, because I don't think, even in the flashback, that was one of the things that I was hoping we'd get. We still don't know why Ozpin goes to these specific people on Earth. Like, it's still just kind of like, poof, it's just some person. And they didn't say anything as far as like it being like a bloodline thing where it's that person's descendants over centuries and stuff like that, which would be really obvious if they had done that. But it's still, at this point, it's kind of just like up in the air. It's just, for whatever reason, he just goes from place to place. And based on what we've seen, I mean, there were a bunch of bodies that weren't kind of shown off during the flashback, because they mentioned some lives were spent, kind of after he lost his kids. He just spent some lives drinking. So at this point, visually, or canonically speaking, Oscar is the youngest person we've seen him transfer into, because even the first person he went into was like a 20-something-year-old person, and then we have Oscar as a teenager. So it'll be interesting to see if we kind of get an answer to that. Maybe Ozpin will show up again. It's like, hey, I noticed that you left because I've been watching the whole time, or something weird like that. But I would love some more information on that. I don't think we'll get the answer as to why Cinder was affected. That would be crazy if that was revealed in the next episode. I highly doubt it, but I wouldn't hate it. I'd be totally fine, like, well, there you go. It was, question, answer, but I don't, that's not really how RWBY tends to work. We might not even get that answer this volume, in all honesty. I hope we do. I like to think we will, because they introduced it. It's kind of the smoking gun element of it all, but ultimately we can just have to wait and see what happens. But definitely looking forward to the next episode. Like I said, we'd love to know what you guys thought about it. Like I said, also want to know what you guys want to see as far as Oscar/Ozpin going into this next episode. And I would love to know your theories on why Cinder was impacted by the Silver Eye blast, I guess. Because honestly, I never even thought of it before until they mentioned it in this episode. Like, oh yeah, Cinder was affected by it. And I guess in my mind, it was kind of the idea that it's a giant blast, so that's why she was affected. It was like a giant, insane, almost seismic wave, but technically, that's not really the case. It only affects Grimm, or things that were kind of possibly born of Grimm. I don't know if they'll pull off a super crazy twist, like, surprise, Cinder is actually Salem's daughter, something crazy like that, which wouldn't be the craziest thing now that I think about it, but that would be a super cool twist if they pulled that off. But like I said, want to know your theories and also what you guys thought about this episode in general, so please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.